Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and it's really great to be at the MINEX conference in person again. I think a lot of us were getting a lot tired of these online forums. So just to move on, so for session 5, the topic is technological risks and solutions to move towards greener mining. This topic considers the options for reducing the environmental footprint where challenges are increasing for project developers and operators. The good news is that technologies are assisting in developing well thought out and smart solutions. Companies should be tackling these challenges early on in the project development in order to minimise future delays and costs, particularly with regards to permitting approvals. We have a very experienced group of presenters here today who will share a range of project case studies and approaches for achieving greener and safer mining solutions. So the first presenter today is Dr. Andrew Bamber from the international consulting group Barra, and his topic is innovation for reduced footprint in European and Balkans projects. So I'll hand it over to you. Thanks, Andrew.
There we go. We're now live. Chris, thanks for the kind introduction. And Arthur, thanks for organising a great conference, and really glad to be here in person as well. So my topic today is innovations for reduced footprint in recent projects that we've done, just a laundry list of case studies and the aspects relating to those studies. I'll spend 2 seconds talking about Barra, because we need to pay the bills, and then I'll run through the aspects of projects that I think are particularly interesting, and some of the drivers that made us think that way about those projects as well. So who are we? We're a boutique engineering company, which in other words means we're small. We've got 3 offices, about 10 people in the UK, 25-ish people now in South Africa, and 1 person who hasn't been seen recently, but we have 1 person in Canada. So we do mining, mineral processing, plant design, infrastructure in-house, so we do like the meaty middle of studies. We don't do geology, but we work quite regularly with partners like CSA and other groups. And we don't do environmental or tailings, and we work regularly with other groups like KP, 90p sold. And we sweet spot for us is due diligence through to definitive feasibility studies. We don't do EPCM or anything like that. We're just not big enough. Really, we like to focus on studies and bring sort of advanced thinking and our experience to those things, and package it reasonably well for the engineering companies to then take on into detailed design and construction. The projects I'm going to talk about today, of the several projects that we could have talked about, Tellerhäuser in Germany, 500,000 tonne per annum underground tin project in Saxony, Germany. We're also still actually working on Synovitz in Czech Republic for European Metals, 2.25 million tonne per annum lithium project in Czechia. Going to talk a little bit about the work we've been doing for Ferexpo on their northern deposits and things that we did to try and move those projects forward. And some recent work we've been doing for Kazakhstansky Nickel on their Shevchenko laterite project in Kazakhstan. So Tellerhäuser, really interesting project. It's an old Saxony, Germany. They've been mining tin there since, 1300? Maybe 12 something. In fact, there are areas in Saxony that are, sort of World Heritage locations with, mining remnant workings from those times. So one of the challenges for this project was that in combination with the fact that it's relatively regularly settled. There are Saxony villages all over the place, and the topography is a bit undulating. There's not a lot of real estate for surface development, so one of the constraints on this project was essentially zero permanent surface impact. It all had to be reclaimed. So a couple of the innovations we brought to the table here. The main thing that allowed us to go for zero impact, because it's actually an old tin and uranium working, so they're extensive from the Soviet era, extensive uranium workings after the tin was mined. They carried on developing it for uranium, so there was substantial pre-existing voids where tailings could be disposed of. So the combination of innovations we brought to Tellerhauser was underground processing, so we were sorting the mined ore underground. We ground it. We developed a process plant location in the old tin workings near the surface, and then repatriated the tailings back into the uranium workings for zero surface impact. The other innovation we brought to this particular project is, again, the remnant tin workings are relatively shallow, but the project itself is deeper tin expressions that were found later, about 6 or 7 kilometers further down. And the development time with traditional development to those areas would have killed the project from an NPV point of view. So one of our recommendations was for the development of twin declines from the existing tin workings using tunnel boring machines. So we just set that at, on day zero, start developing those declines. With tunnel boring machines, the development rate is obviously superior to traditional development. So it's higher capex, but at the end of the day, lower opex way of getting into these deeper deposits. Synovitz, again, really interesting project. Like the common theme for some of the things we've been doing recently is, there's a remnant mining aspect to many of these projects that we do in Europe. I think somebody touched on that yesterday. So there's an old tin mine called Zinnwald that sits above Synovitz. It's actually a mine museum, again, sort of mining, German mining museum from like the 1600s. Really interesting to visit if you go there. And the Synovitz lithium mine is going to be developed essentially below the old Zinnwald tin mine. So it's a high tonnage underground operation, 2.25 million tons per annum, open stoping, but it's got to have minimal surface impact because you've got old remnant workings and a mine museum just above it, and then the Synovitz village is just above that. So it had to be designed with, we did quite a lot of work on blast design for zero surface impact. But again, things that the client actually had, we didn't necessarily offer some of these innovations. The client was demanding, for instance, battery electric fleet. Again, for minimal, we didn't have to go for zero surface impact, but for minimal surface impact, we brought a lot of the comminution stages underground, because we're doing such extensive footwall development anyway. Putting primary, secondary, and tertiary crushing and all the screening equipment underground, so then the crushed material comes to surface was relatively easy. For Expo, again, a different context to the previous two projects. This is Poltava mining complex in Ukraine, and these are the deposits to the north of the 3 pits they have operating already, where we've done the preliminary study to suggest that open pit mining isn't going to be economic, so we're looking for other approaches for what would otherwise have been mined by open pit methods. So we're now looking at sort of high volume transverse sublevel caving approach for the northern deposits. But one of the challenges for Expo, it's a highly intercalated iron deposit. So you've got relatively attractive titaniferous magnetite iron bands, but interspersed with rubbish, and that becomes very difficult to mine with caving methods and deliver something that the plant can treat. So one of the innovations we brought to the table at Expo was to do, again, in-mine sorting. So we're putting machines underground that have got the ability to discriminate between the high-grade magnetite iron and these waste bands as they're mining. Both products have to come out, so it can't stay on the ground, but at least the mining process itself, so the big scoops underground can actually discriminate between the high-grade iron and get that to the plants, and then the low-grade waste is staying or going straight to the waste dump, and that really helps the economics. Just again, an interesting hark back to a talk from yesterday. I think Tony talked about, would you develop a mine in a war zone? So we did the initial northern deposit study last year, and we were supposed to continue with that this year. So Alex, our client in Poltava, which is actually on the east side of Ukraine, they are continuing with the study, but he suggested we should wait with the site visit for maybe next year when the Russians are gone. Shevchenko and nickel, how are we doing for time? Good.
5 minutes.
Shevchenko and nickel, again, a different project context to the other projects. It's a very large, low-grade laterite deposit, essentially on the border with Siberia. And again, it's something that we kind of specialize in, are these sort of in-ground situations where the ore types are mixed, and classic bulk mining methods are not going to be effective in getting a quality product to go to the plant. And how do you develop systems for defining what the specific lithologies might be that you want to extract from among the lithologies that are available, in a way that you can perhaps then mine at bulk mining cost levels, but deliver a more selected product to the process plant. So again, Shevchenko, for the study, we're looking at a combination of two innovations that make this relatively low-grade laterite deposit a lot more attractive. It's yet to be proven whether it's going to move forward into the next stage of study. But in-mine sorting of the laterite, so that you get the, in fact, in this case, it's the high-grade limonites that go to a leach process. It's actually not HPAL, I think it's going to go to heap leach. And then there are saprolitic horizons underneath the limonites, and they would get mined at the same time, but separated out in the mining process, and they go to a more conventional pyrometallurgical route, except RKEF, which was studied in the previous iteration. The PFS was about 4 years ago. Doesn't give it's just too expensive. So one of the innovations we've brought to the study at Shevchenko is a new smelting technology called ESS, which it starts with a conventional fossil. You burn the mix in the furnace to create the first melt, but then there's an induction arrangement at the bottom that keeps the melt essentially at melt temperature, and then as you introduce fresh feed into the furnace, that becomes essentially autogenously smelted at the bottom of the furnace. And the thermal efficiency of an ESS process compared to RKEF is like 5 to 1. So again, for projects like laterite projects, which are highly energy intensive because it's basically smelting the stuff that comes out of the ground, if you can achieve a 5 to 1 energy efficiency over the conventional process, you can bring positive economics to a project that otherwise wouldn't go forward. So in conclusion, and I think this is common among the room and the consultants and the clients in the room, modern projects face a lot of challenges, including communities that don't want a mine to go forward at all, or don't want a surface expression of that mine, but might be more comfortable if it went ahead but had no surface expression, or just overall we want to go for lower carbon emissions in the operations that we design. And there are innovations available that are commercially available that can be deployed at study stage, such that when the mine goes forward into implementation, we have innovations baked in that make them A, possible to go forward, and B, will be more efficient operations with lower footprint when they do get developed. So it's an exciting time to be in engineering and consulting and studies, because I think it's a sweet spot for new things that are available that can be brought to make projects just better projects. Thanks very much.
Thanks very much, Andrew. You're under time, which was fantastic. And thanks for the very relevant topics, which I'm sure a lot of the support consultants and operating companies are, facing those similar sort of challenges and technology innovations. So our next speaker is Rapush Tola, who is a director with the Albanian National Authority for Safety and Emergencies in Mining. I believe his talk is going to be in Albanian, if you've got headsets there. And he'll be sharing his experiences on the topic of safety at work in the mining industry. So thank you very much, Rapush.
Appreciating is very important the development of works of this forum in its entirety. I will focus in my speech at the occupational health and safety and security and protection of health in the mining sector, and in a summarized way I will present the activity and the aim of the institution that I had, the AXEM Authority. This institution began in 1961 when the development of the mining industry brought the need to establish the inspection and rescue unit in the mining, which aimed to control the safety and security and rescue activities in the mining sector in the Republic of Albania. During this 60-year period, this institution has provided an important contribution in increasing security and safety and preventing the serious events in the mining industry. This institution, apart from the inspection, conducts other emergency and rescue tasks in the mining activity, and also provide help in civil emergencies when necessary to provide our intervention. The rescue teams have conducted several rescue operations with high risk levels, such as gas explosions, underground fires in the coal and copper mines prior to the 90s. In cases of demolitions and floods because of waters and sludges, and in case of civil emergencies and toxification from poisoning gases and opening of water wells from residents in rural areas. First of all, very briefly for the auditor and participants, I would like to say that the mining sector in the Republic of Albania is an important element of the economic structure of the country, transformed and completely reorganized. It is extended throughout the Republic, the territory of the Republic of Albania. The right of the development and exploitation of the mines today is in the hands of the private sector. The government just has the ownership on these assets. Based on the changes in the mining sector, we now have a full reformed legal, administrative and technical system. The legal framework, organizational framework has been amended with regards to drafting and implementing the state policies with regards to security and safety in this sector. With regards to the development of mining sector, approximately 1,200 mining permits have been provided. We have 600 mining permits that are effective nowadays. We have 16 enriching plants and factories that are operational right now. In the mining sector, we have direct employment of 10,000 employees. Second of all, it's worth highlighting that the state policies and governmental policies, apart from the qualitative and quantitative development and as well as technical and technological one of this sector, a priority has been focused in defining the legal requirements to ensure and guarantee the health, safety and security in all the steps of development of this activity. We have several laws to implement it, such as the law on health, on occupational health and safety, on emergencies and rescue in the mining activities, the law on mining sector in the Republic of Albania, and the law on launching in the market and supervision of the explosives for civil use in the Republic of Albania. Pursuant to the law on occupational health and security in the mining activities and underground works in hydropower plants, we also have the respective regulations. Based on the problems in the last years on occupational health and security and underground works in hydropower plants and also in underground abandoned mines, the AXEM Authority, by decision of Council of Ministers, is in charge to inspect the underground works of the hydropower plants and to monitor the abandoned closed mines. I would like to highlight as an important fact that the entire legislation of Albania that is already amended with regards to development and safety in mines and in every other bylaw, we have mainstreamed the international conventions and the EU directives that have been ratified by the Albanian parliament, such as Convention 174 for preventing serious accidents in the industry of 1993, the Convention 1555 for occupational health and safety and security of 1981, Convention 176 on occupational health and safety and security of 1995, and Directive 2014-28 on harmonization of member states' laws with regards to launching in the market of explosives and supervision of these explosives for civil use. Third of all, this institution operates by implementing 4 key functions: inspecting every job place in mining activity. We conduct inspections, identify problems, prevent serious events, and also provide counseling, advices, and order the implementation and enforcement of legal requirements in the mining activities. Second of all, we ensure and guarantee the immediate support of every mining entity in case of underground emergencies, and also taking measures to rescue people in these serious events or in other civil events, such as fires, opening of wells, and so on and so forth. We inspect every job place in every entity that uses explosives, whether in the mining activity or civil engineering. We inspect closed mines, as well as prevent risks in abandoned mines. The key function is to evaluate occupational safety and security and to prevent risks and failures in the mining activities. We do this through inspection, and in order to realize this function, Aksam Authority has defined the categorization of mining entities based on risk, and we also have determined the norms of carrying out inspections. In all mining underground activities with gas regime, inspection is conducted not less than 3 years per year. The inspection in underground mining activities without gas regime, inspection is conducted not less than twice a year. The inspection on surface mines in open pits, the inspection is conducted once a year. The procedures to conduct inspection is done pursuant to the law on inspection in the Republic of Albania. All inspections conducted by Aksam are scheduled for each year and for each month. All inspections conducted by Aksam since April 2018 are done all online. Aksam conducts around 700 inspections per year. The unscheduled inspections happen only when we have serious events in mining activities or based on information taken by public institutions or entities, and we conclude that there is a need for further inspection, or when we see the blatant violation of laws on occupational health, safety, and security. Aksam Authority conducts 25-30 inspections per year that are not scheduled. Pursuant to the law and also the current condition of the development of the mining activity, inspection process start taking into consideration every step of the way as below. We start with preparing with the monthly inspection program 15 days prior to the inspection. We generate the program by entering into the system the inspection issues as well as a team of inspectors that will conduct the inspection. The entity that will undergo inspection is notified 3 to 5 days prior to inspection. The team of inspectors becomes familiar with the problems and tasks left from previous inspections in the entity undergoing inspection. For every entity, an authorization of inspection is issued by the chief inspector. Inspection consists in controlling and inspecting every job place or job position of the mining activity, identifying and issuing conclusions on the current situation of safety in the mining facilities, improvement of failures during the last inspection, and when serious legal, technical, or reiterated violations or infringements are identified, we take administrative measures pursuant to the laws and regulations on occupational safety and security. Decision-making and conclusions upon all inspections consist in informing the entity on legal unclarities identified. We provide counseling to the entity that has been inspected in order to enforce and implement the legal requirements. We also order them to correct the legal infringements or legal requirement infringements and eliminate all consequences deriving by them. And also we review the complaints of the inspected entity, and also we inform the entity for any decision taken for that entity upon inspection. Fourthly, regulated in a unique manner, AXEM has the unit of emergencies and rescue team. This team is an ad hoc team that is trained and organized within the Directorate of Emergencies and Rescue. This function is regulated by special regulation for each team of emergencies and rescue. We have the organization of emergencies and rescue service in entities, and we also cooperate, coordinate, and train the rescue teams. We provide the natural, material, financial resources in order to enable intervention in these entities that have serious events. Fifthly, AXEM conducts inspections in different entities that use explosives in different civil engineering. And in such case, AXEM inspects every entity that uses explosives in its works. It addresses in the technical commission and equips with a certificate every employee that deals with explosives in the Republic of Albania. This is a certificate of a fire master. It approves, upon approval in the technical commission, the technical projects of works with explosives for every entity that requires to be equipped with authorization to use civil explosives, and also approves all entities that need to have warehouses to store this explosive. AXEM equips every year with a certificate of fire master 80 to 100 persons that are interested to use explosives. It approves 20 to 25 technical projects for works with explosives. It approves 10 to 15 projects for construction of explosive warehouses. 6, for protection and security in mining. Upon the transformation of the sector and changing of the structure of the exploitation and processing of mining due to the market economy, we have faced all the challenges emerging during this period, and also the inherited problems, where we can mention the following. The mining permits or the rights of exploitation have been given to people or entities with zero experience in mining, and this has created a lot of problems with regards to the technical processes of all mining entities, and it has increased our controls, which have become more and more often in order to ensure occupational health and safety and security in these mining entities. After the 90s, the mining sector underwent a serious crisis accompanied with the closure of mines for a long time, the damage of devices, installations, equipments, excessive migration of qualified workforce. The majority of them left to go abroad, the other part were retired, and this led to a very reduced number of qualified workforce that we still have today. More than 80% of the mining permits are given for old mining works or old mines that were active prior to the 90s, and nowadays they are small mining entities, but they cannot implement or do high investments in practice. We need to qualify the experts that work in the mining sector. We have lack of specialists and technicians, and this is a problem that the private companies face with every day, because we have a massive migration of young people, but we also lack vocational schools to prepare these technicians, apart from the vocational school of Bulchiza, that also those people coming out of that school leave to go abroad. In many mining areas of the country where we have the activity for exploitation of copper and coal, works have been abandoned without taking proper measures to provide the safety and security. Based on the situation and the problems that we are faced with when we have had people losing their lives in old mines, AXEM has added the process of monitoring abandoned mines. And thanks to special funds of the Albanian government, we have enabled the closure of a lot of abandoned mines in the mines of Korçay, Pogradec, Libraj, Erseka, Tirana, and Tepelena. In conclusion, we can say that our challenge as the authority that ensures security at work, one of the highest risk activities, we aim to reduce at minimum the cases of serious incidents in mining activities and also in hydropower plant works. Thank you very much.
Can't believe it. Two presenters and they've both been on time. So thank you very much for the overview of the Authority for Safety and Emergencies in Mining. A very important topic from a safety perspective, but also managing the environmental impacts during operations and also during closure as well. I can certainly appreciate the some of the challenges in Albania, particularly around gas in some of the mines. So thanks for the update there. The next presenter is James Williams, who is one of my colleagues with SRK Consulting, Senior Resource Geologist, and he'll be providing a presentation on the topic of drilling and sampling considerations for assessment of mine tailings. Thanks, James.
Thank you very much, Chris, and thank you, Arthur, for organising this event. So my topic, as Chris just mentioned, is going to cover the drilling and sampling considerations for assessment of mine tailings. Now, in effect, this is the first step for mineral resource estimate, which my colleague James Davey, in the following talk, will talk about REPP following on. Okay, so what is a tailings storage facility, or what are mine tailings? They are effectively process ore and mine waste. So they've gone through a processing plant, they've been ground, and therefore they need to be deposited somewhere, typically in an impoundment, which is the image on the right, because they're highly enriched in moisture, or they can be a dry stack, which is basically like a waste rock dump, and they have no real confinement. I should mention that impoundments usually use a local topography. Okay, so here's just a few examples of an image. There's the impoundment there, slurry pipeline, high moisture content, and here's a conveyor belt in the revolve of a dry stack. Still very high moisture, but there's obviously a decrease, and therefore much more solid content within there. Okay, so past the general introduction. So why are we going to target tailings or tailings storage facility, particularly historic ones? Well, if you can't grow it, you need to mine it. So they can be attractive basically due to the pre-concentrations through going through mineral processing. Your industrial minerals or your economic metals can be enriched. In recent years, the commodity prices have been going up, but the last few months there's been a little bit of a downturn, so don't hold me to that one. There's also improvements in the mineral processing sector. Again, if you've gone through a processing facility, can you actually recover this metal at an economic grade? And different changes require different challenges. There obviously are environmental benefits. It's obvious, cleanup, remediation. That's obvious for anyone to see. What most people don't necessarily consider is the fact that there's no drill and blast and it's free dig. So there's the whole environmental consideration of the explosives. You don't necessarily need them on site unless you're on active mine and you're reprocessing your own tailings, then it's a separate matter. Also limited grinding, which ultimately means your CO2 footprint is a lot less, because 3 to 5% of the global energy use is used in grinding rock. So you've automatically reduced your CO2 footprint, and you can kind of say, I'm going in an environmental sustainable way. So here's just an overview of how you would start from the geological domaining through to a mineral resource statement, and I'm going to talk about the three up here, and my colleague James will cover the rest of them. So, there's three key requirements for evaluating a tailings storage facility, or even a stockpile. You could say you need to know the volume, the density, and the assays or the concentrations of metals within the stockpile or tailings storage facility itself. So, step one, go to the mine. If there are any public records, source fees, processing circuits, metal balances. What were they mining? What grades were they producing? are there any assays from the actual feed themselves going into the tailings? You also want to know if, in more recent times, there are obviously various surveys throughout the tailings, the pre-deposition and post-deposition. They're the key two surveys you really want, but you can get around this. So once you've done that, you need to therefore attempt to find some assays, either from the actual mine feed itself or from taking grab samples to just determine what is in the tailings facility. Is it gold? Is it arsenic? And you need to know both the deleterious as well as the potential economic minerals. Once you've done that, you may consider doing some limited test work depending on the mineral species. However, that's not always the case if it's required. Once you've done that initial test work, there may well not be any need to proceed. So again, it's kind of a stage gate review. If elements are high enough concentrations, you may wish to walk away. But if you actually think, no, I can reprocess this, I can make some money, I can improve the environment, then you take it to the next stage, which is ultimately drilling, sampling, which then leads onto a mineral resource estimate. So surveys of volumes. 4 typical or main types of surveys: satellite, drones, laser scanners, and point surveys. Point surveys is a traditional hand survey with a ground. A man just walking around marking a point. That's fine for delineating the outer extents of the berms of a tailings storage facility, though much more better is an automated process such as a laser scanner, which is the central image in here, which is actually a stockpile survey I did in Saudi Arabia. And then the image on the right is an elevation model from a drone survey for a tailings storage facility in Congo. Obviously, the calibration of survey equipment is vital if you're in the right space. That's separate, but you need to make sure you actually get the volumes right. You don't want to over or understate that, which obviously impacts the tonnage considerations. Okay, so critically though, visual imagery is a very useful tool in this. So you can easily identify the outer limits of the TSF. In this case, there's a red line there. So you help you with determining your outer boundaries. High resolution imagery can be used from various disciplines. That's why you might as well tag it along with a drone survey or satellite imagery. I'd recommend a drone because you can refly it at multiple stages throughout the project's lifespan. And then coming on to densities, which obviously in combination with volumes can be used to determine the tonnage. You obviously need to know the dry density. That's typically how we report a mineral resource estimate. So that needs to be in consideration of moisture. Now, tailings are highly enriched in fluids, and they might also be laterally in certain elevations, be more enriched with water just because it's more permeable. So you need to consider the bulk density by undertaking some trial mining and or taking density throughout the profile. You can do that through drilling or through pitting and trenching. The image on the top with the green mesh here is a post-mine survey, and then the red mesh here is the pre-mine survey, which ultimately allowed us to calculate the volume in combination with the weighbridge and truck and tally counts. We were able to back calculate the density of that stockpile. And obviously you can see it as a bit more of a local or lateral or vertical consideration, because tailings storage facilities can be open for years. They may have different mine sources. They may have been mining different areas enriched in lead, galena, for example, or zinc, sphalerite. So therefore, lateral and vertical variations in density can be quite varied. Now, drilling. So this is basically bringing everything back in for you to assess the grades. Ideally, it should be in a planned in an optimal manner and in a grid in order that your samples are both represented vertically and laterally throughout the TSF. And that's same for density. So if you can tag along with density with the drilling, then that's highly advantageous. We obviously need to consider the continuity of the grades. The samples are likely to be wet. Recovery is key here. So standard RC drilling, diamond drilling isn't necessarily the way to go forward. And then the classification for the level of study. Is this just an initial assessment for scoping, or are you going to go for a DFS and you want measured and you're going to go through the whole process? There's 2 main methods. There's auger and sonic. Sonic is a bit larger rig here on the right. And then there's an auger, which is a man-portable rig in effect with a little engine of an auger and a sensor and a tailings storage. I should note that Banneker is effectively an auger, but it's man-powered. That's incredibly labour-intensive. though you need to consider with the water, the content, how easily you can get your rigs in, because obviously you may not be able to get that in somewhere where it's flooded, whilst this can be floated on a little platform or pontoon. As mentioned with the density, you need to take your samples throughout the profile to show that variability. They need to be logged immediately coming out the drill barrel, not just for lithologies, because it looks like sand. You might not be able to tell anything different, but visually the colour may change. That can help you with determination of the base of the tailings storage facility, or different layers from different feeds from different mines throughout the lifestyle of a tailings facility. Once you've done that logging, you need to bag it and then make sure it's sealed so you can send it to the lab for moisture analysis, as well as you can use that then for density determination. Obviously, all samples should be submitted for assay analysis along with quality assurance and quality control protocols to ensure that the correctness of sampling whilst monitoring the quality of data. So that's CRMs, blanks, duplicates, in order for you to get a high degree of confidence associated with samples, which impacts into your mineral resource classification and quality and quantity of the data. So, in summary, reprocessing of tailing materials has the potential for significant economic and environmental and social benefits if carried out responsibly and in the right locations. You need to identify at a high level the concentrations and industrial minerals within the TSF, determine if these are potentially amenable to reprocessing through historical mine records, grab sampling, or metallurgical test work. Vital to determine the most appropriate method of sampling, surveying at the project stage for your mineralization and budget. Sample volume is always represents less than a millionth of a deposit volume. Therefore, you need to understand why you're doing it in order to maximize sample quality, optimize sample locations, and use your data in the best possible way. The quality of an MRE, or mineral resource estimate, is only as good as the quality and quantity of your data. Thank you very much.
Thanks, James, for providing an overview of more of a specialist technique there for assessing tailings facilities compared to normal sort of resource geology estimations. So please feel free to reach out to James if you want to discuss further. So the next presenter is another colleague, Dr. James Davey, and he is resource geologist consultant with SRK UK. And his presentation, it follows along similar lines, progressing through to unlocking value in historic mine tailings for mineral resource assessments. Thanks, James.
Okay. Thanks, Chris, and thanks, James, for the introduction to the topic. So I'm James Davey. I'm a resource geology consultant at SRK based in the UK, and I'm going to continue on the topic of tailings reprocessing projects. James kind of covered more the data acquisition side of things, and then I'm going to kind of press on to using that data for an MRE or a mineral resource estimate. I'm going to skip over that slide, so I think James has introduced TSFs pretty well. James covered many of the pros and cons of reprocessing projects for TSFs, but I thought I'd just touch on a couple of kind of economic and potential environmental benefits as well. So first and foremost is significantly reduced mining costs. Given that over half of all energy consumption in the mining industry is on crushing rock, you can imagine that a deposit that has already been mined and has been crushed stands, to save significant amounts of energy and therefore money. Another aspect is that generally across the board over the last couple of decades, mineral processing technologies have improved significantly. And so effectively we can recover more metal from lower grade ores. And a related point to that is that we can look at recovering more secondary commodities as well. So I guess the key example here is cobalt, recovering cobalt from sedimentary rock-hosted copper cobalt ores in the Central African Copper Belt, for example. And at SRK, we've worked on a couple of projects in the last few years for clients who are looking to recover both the copper and the cobalt from these kinds of tailings facilities. Moving to kind of the environmental benefits or potential environmental benefits, I've already touched on significantly reduced rock crushing requirements, and that obviously has an impact in terms of the material that you would be processing has much lower embodied carbon than an equivalent deposit that hasn't been mined and is sitting in situ and needs to be mined and crushed. And then another aspect, I guess, is hopefully the reduction in the total number and area of brand new greenfield mine sites that you would need to develop as a result. There's aspects, of course, around removing or remediating pollution, for example, acid mine drainage, and then hopefully being able to restore the habitats once you reprocess that material. The final point there is the potential to reuse or recycle waste material for other purposes, and I've got an example in a case study later in the talk, which is a good example of that. But ultimately, the main benefit there is that you can reduce the volume of the new waste that you'll be producing and depositing after you've reprocessed the historical tailings. So on the topic of reducing volumes or volumes in general, I thought I'd just draw your attention to this graphic at the bottom. This is just a plot of the contribution to the total global tailings by commodity reported on a volumetric basis. And you can see here that low-grade copper and gold deposits, they represent or they contribute about 2/3 of all of the global tailings that's ever been deposited. Whereas higher grade and also industrial mineral projects typically produce less tailings. So I guess this is just something to bear in mind going forward as the whole industry is tending towards mining higher tonnages, higher volumes of lower grade ore. We're going to be producing more and more tailings going forward. So this is kind of an overall flow chart of a mineral resource estimate workflow, which James kindly introduced before. And yeah, James kind of covered many of the aspects on the top row of this workflow around data acquisition and then validating that data. He's left me the unenviable task of covering the rest of this diagram, which is not something I'm going to try and do here, but if you'd like to discuss kind of any general aspects around mineral resource estimates, then please come and talk to myself or James afterwards. What I'm going to try and do instead, given the limited time, is focus on just a couple of aspects which I think are most relevant to tailings reprocessing projects. So, namely, they are the domaining process, the resource domaining process, which can be a little bit different for what is effectively a man-made deposit as opposed to an in-situ deposit. And then also reporting a compliant mineral resource statement with consideration for RPEE, which I will get onto a bit later. So resource domaining, I appreciate not everybody in the room is a resource geologist. So firstly, what is a resource domain? Well, effectively it's a volume of rock that we can model that defines a distinct grade population within our samples. And these domains are typically based on both geological and statistical considerations. And then once we've modeled these volumes, we can use them to constrain estimates of both grade and tonnage as we develop a resource model. The process of actually producing resource domains can vary in complexity quite a lot with tailings storage facilities in particular. So on the left is an example of quite a simple example where actually the material which was dumped in an old river channel was quite homogenized, and there wasn't really any need for pulling apart different grade populations. So there all we needed was a reliable top and a reliable base so that we knew the total volume of material. So we could, of course, survey the top, as James just kind of covered the methods. The base we actually modeled from drill hole intercepts because there was no surveyed base before the material was dumped. And then this image is just a plot of relative thickness with the hotter colors being thicker. And you can see that actually the model, the domain here that we've produced replicates some of the kind of geomorphological features of the river channel system quite well. So that was just a case of just taking top and bottom and then taking that whole volume as a resource domain for estimation. On the right, there's a bit more of a complex example. So here, this was a TSF where material had been deposited from geochemically distinct ore bodies, very different ore bodies, over a period of several decades, and there weren't necessarily historical production records so that we could reconcile what material was dumped where and when. So this was a case of taking a multi-element data set. It was quite a good data set here. and kind of going through much more of a process of exploratory data analysis, reviewing a lot of kind of geochemical plots. And then we basically picked out a few elements which we thought were kind of most relevant or most important for distinguishing different types of material geochemically. What we then did is develop an unsupervised machine learning workflow, which used self-organizing maps to effectively decluster the different geochemical populations in the TSF. And the image on screen on the right here is just a matrix of a bunch of XY scatter plots, different geochemical plots with those different geochemical clusters or grade populations coded onto those and in the different colors. What you can then do is take those geochemical clusters, you can simplify them down so that we've just got 3 or 4 clusters, and then code them back onto the drill holes, which we've drilled in the TSF. So the image on the top basically is that, and you can see that it starts to actually quite neatly define a stratigraphy with the orange on top, the green in the middle, and then the blue on the base. And then that allows us to develop quite a simple stratigraphic model, and you can see a cross-section on the bottom, so that we can actually produce volumes to represent these different types of material. Those volumes we can then statistically validate and use as our resource domains or estimation domains going forward to estimate both grade and tonnage. So I'm going to skip through that workflow quite a lot here, and I'm going to assume that we've been through the grade interpolation process, and effectively we have a resource block model. As I say, please feel free to come and have a chat with us if you'd like to discuss how we get to that point. What I'd now like to just focus on for a couple of minutes is reporting a mineral resource in compliance or in accordance with pretty much any of the major global resource reporting codes. And a major cornerstone of all of them now is reporting with reasonable prospects for eventual economic extraction, or RPEEE. So it's a bit of a mouthful. But what RPEEE effectively means is that we can't simply just report all of the material within our resource model on a global basis with no kind of economic considerations, no cutoff. We need to take a set of reasonable and justifiable technical and economic assumptions or considerations, and I put a few of those on the left-hand side here. And then we only report the part of the resource model which satisfies those assumptions or those criteria. So effectively, we're only reporting the part of the resource model that we can demonstrate that we can extract in an economically viable way. So as I said, there's various different kind of criteria and assumptions that we might look at. I'm just going to focus on a couple, and the first of those is mineral processing test work, which is particularly relevant for tailings reprocessing projects. So effectively here, what we need to do is we need to take a set of hopefully representative samples and try and demonstrate that the properties of the material that we have are amenable to recovering the minerals of interest at a reasonable cost, because we might not have a good grasp on the behavior of the material that we have. And as I say, in more complex examples where domains are geochemically different, that material may behave differently. So there's a wide variety of different mineral kind of processing test work that we might undertake, and it's completely dependent on the actual TSF on a case-by-case basis. A couple of examples I'll just pull out. We might do some particle size distribution tests, some PSD tests, if we think that, for example, a certain size fraction of the material holds the most value. Or we might look at density separation. If we think that relative differences in density, we can use them to separate out the main kind of revenue generating component of the material versus the gangue or the waste material. Another kind of key consideration, both in terms of the opportunities and the challenges that it presents, are kind of ESG considerations, both of which kind of both the opportunities and challenges need considering in equal measure in order to kind of realize the full value of any tailings reprocessing project. But broadly speaking, tailings reprocessing projects can be considered kind of circular economy activities if we can balance the cleanup and the reprocessing of historical waste with the generation of revenue through the production of a valuable mineral or metal product. I've kind of touched on many of the aspects in this little matrix. For example, the lower embodied carbon of material that's already been crushed at surface, the potential to remove and clean up pollutants and then restore those habitats. One aspect I haven't really touched on is climate resilience. And this is the idea effectively that we can hopefully we can de-risk older historical TSFs, and as we reprocess that material, the new waste that we generate, we can then deposit in a TSF that has been designed, built, and hopefully maintained in a way that's more aligned with global tailing standards today, and that TSF, that new TSF, will be a lot more resilient to changes in extreme weather conditions and general climate change. The other aspect on this slide is, of course, the social side of things, and of course, any tailings reprocessing project hopefully will pay taxes to the local government and has the potential, of course, to employ local people, whether it be upskilling of artisanal miners or more skilled labour. It's not all opportunities in the ESG space, though, of course, with tailings reprocessing projects. There are a few challenges, and I guess the main one here is that we need to be cognizant that although we are hopefully cleaning up and reprocessing old tailings material, we will not fully consume that material. We will still produce more waste, and that, you know, we need to find a suitable site, permit a suitable site for that new waste, and obviously that is a challenge, particularly in Europe. Just one other that I'll touch on this slide is, of course, we need to establish and then maintain a social license to operate in any kind of area that we're working in, and that obviously requires, you know, stakeholder engagement at both a local and global level, right from the earliest stages of the project development. So I thought this is my penultimate slide, I thought I'd just finish up with a very quick case study of how it can be done. And this is Barrick's Golden Sunlight mine in Montana. This was mined for gold between 1982 and 2019. And upon closing the mining operation itself, Barrick have developed a tailings reprocessing project to reprocess a lot of the historical tailings that was deposited in the 80s and the 90s. And what they effectively do is reprocess quite pyrite-rich tailings. They produce a sulfur concentrate, which they then sell to their kind of sister assets in Nevada gold mines, so down in the Carlin Trend, which is used in gold production down there. And that obviously remediates the historical TSF site, and then the more inert tailings, new waste that they produce from that process is then backfilled into one of the old pits, and that allows, in time, the site of the old TSF to be rehabilitated, hopefully. So this is one example of kind of a project that could be considered a circular economy activity. So I appreciate I'm probably running up against my time, so I won't dwell on, you know, regurgitate all of this information. I've already talked about most of it. What I would do, though, is just emphasize that top point, that a robust geological model fundamentally underpins a reliable mineral resource estimate, and this is true of man-made tailing storage facilities just as much as it is true of an in situ kind of naturally occurring deposit. So yeah, feel free to come and have a chat with us later, and I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you, James. Pretty much spot on with time all around here today. So thank you very much to the presenters. And thanks for that summary, which sort of provides a nice overview of resource through to extraction and rehabilitation of historic tailings. Okay, so our next presenter is Ian Pickard, who is co-founder and CEO of Strategia Worldwide, and with a presentation topic, a practical guide to tailing storage facilities risk management. Thanks, Ian.
Thanks very much, and I'll try not to break the record of sticking to time. So Tailings Protect, what is it? It does what it says on the tin: validate, ensure, monitor, ensure. We're a consortium of 4 companies. Ourselves, a company called Insight Terra, come on to them. McGill, who are insurance brokers. Go to the next slide, here we go. And WSP, WSP Gold is now, I think, familiar to, I'm sure, most of you in the room. I'm sure I don't need to tell you about the global industry standard on tailings management. It's setting the standard. There are other standards out there as well, Canadian Association of Mining Standard. There's going to be a certification regime coming down the track pretty soon. And we'll come on to the insurers in more detail, but the big insurers are not going to touch a tailings risk unless it's certified. We're pretty clear on that. We've been piloting our solution for a year now with a platinum mine in South Africa to sort of prove the concept, if you like. It was a high-risk dam, and there are a number of downstream communities that could potentially be affected by it. So it's been a very useful exercise to sort of figure out how this works and the relationship between the different parties involved in it. Here we go. Essentially, it's got four components, and I'll drill into them a bit more. There's the validate bit, there's the monitor bit, and there's the ensure bit. Point I'd make is they're not necessarily sequential, and every mine is going to be different. And some are going to want all of it, some are going to want some of it, some want some of it now, and some of it will be later. So we shouldn't get hung up on you need to do all of this. But there's a validate phase, which is the gap analysis against the global standard. There is the monitoring system design that flows from that, having identified the risks, what needs to be monitored. That's very much the terrain of the engineer record or the company engineer. We're not trying to do that for them. We're working with them. And then there is the execution of the monitoring system, the purchase of the appropriate instruments, their installation and making sure they're technically feasible. And we will do that with the systems integrator, the company providing them, or maybe the company's own staff. And then there is the data transformation bit, come on to that. And then there is the dashboard, which I'll come on to. And last but not least is the insurance bit, which may be not of so much interest to people in this room, but I can promise you it's of great interest to the Chief Finance Officer and the Treasury team, because it's very expensive, becoming increasingly so, and more difficult to obtain, and we can save an awful lot of money here. Okay. Validate. We do a gap analysis against the standard. It's independent, and we have a lot of discussion about the role of the Independent Tailings Review Board and the EOR and what have you. But the ICMM conformance protocols for the global standard make it very clear that it needs to be a different body from the ITRB or the engineer record, and also it needs to cover ESG risks, which the engineer record or the ITRB will not be looking at. So it needs to be broader and it needs to be independent. And there's different ways to do this. And in this case, you know, we work with WSP who did the gap analysis, and you can see the sort of format you get. And on the back of that gap analysis, with the company, we design a plan to fill in the gaps, elements of which are going to be monitoring. And that is something we then share with insurers, so they can see that, yes, we know what the issues are, and secondly, we've got a plan to plug those gaps. The monitoring bit is the technology. It can be in-the-ground sensors, it can be satellite surveillance, it is whatever is appropriate for that particular facility. In this case, liquefaction is a big issue, but we're going to be measuring the water levels and slope stability as well, and we're also very worried about the downstream communities. So there's an element around that as well. The data is aggregated and displayed in one cloud-based location. So it's a single source of truth of either a single facility or the whole portfolio of facilities across a company. And it can then be shared with whoever you want to share it with. It can be shared with your regulators. It can be shared with your insurers, shared with your board, your safety committee, your risk committee. It can even be shared with your communities. You might want to show it to all of it to them, but you might want to show the bits that you want them to see. It's entirely customizable, what it shows and who you show it to. But it's 24/7, absolutely on all the time. In the pilot case, we did it using 4G, so not too expensive to communicate it. In more remote locations, we've looked at one in the DRC, where we would use satellite links. And we have a relationship with Inmarsat, because Insight Terror team who do this was spun out of Inmarsat, and we can access their satellite comms network. But that's an unusual case, to be frank. Most places, terrestrial comms are fine. Proof of the pudding, well, is what the dashboard looks like. That's a mock-up, the sort of thing you can see. In this case, we're looking at liquefaction, piezometric charting, and you can see straight away that it's got thresholds built in, it's got alarms, and in the case of the pilot project, well, we've had one alarm. It was addressed quickly, but journaled, so everybody can see the year data now, insurers in particular, that it's there, it's being acted on, and the thing is being actively managed, continually, 24/7, not just a once-a-year survey. And if you don't believe me, hopefully I can show you the status of the pilot dam right now. We can flick over, there we go. So that's taken off my laptop, and that's a live feed. And you can see there at the moment, you can see the piezometer arrays. There's 4 arrays of them. You can see the status of the piezometers themselves. They're all green, I'm happy to say. And they do go amber and they do go red, you know, you have problems. And you can see the phreatic surface levels. And if you drill into it, you can see the thresholds and you can see where they are against the thresholds. But it's entirely customizable how you set it up. But that's live data as we speak. Our client are using this as a central plank in their green mining pitch to list the company. They're going to list the company on NASDAQ, Tech Exchange in New York, very unusually for a mining company, as a green miner, and what I'm showing you now is central to it. They say they've got the only genuinely 24/7 monitored facility in Africa. Whether that's true or not, I don't know, but that's what they say. So, you know, it's no longer a concept. This works, and it's working today. Thanks very much. I'll go back to the slides. And you can see there, you know, it's a mock-up, but however you want to configure it. Insurance bit, perhaps less relevant here, but really important for the finance teams. So what we have is a journaling function that builds up the data, and they can be used with the broker to show to the underwriter the history of the dam. And the broker doesn't need to be McGill, it can be Marsh or Aon or anybody else. We are broker agnostic. McGill use it for their own clients, obviously, but they also have helped sell it to the insurance markets. And we've briefed over 60 mining underwriters now, who are all very supportive. We're also going to produce them a summary report in the format that they want, not necessarily the telephone book they often get, 10% of which is relevant to them. So that makes it easier to digest. And proof of the pudding is we expect this to get much better terms and pricing. And some dams are currently uninsurable, and you can see what's happened in the insurance market in the graphic there. And most importantly, standard practice in insurance markets is to offer a risk engineering bursary, they call it, up to 2% of the premium to cover the cost. So I'm not saying it's free, but I think you can look to your insurer to make a significant contribution toward the cost. So we would say, why wouldn't you do this? Lower the premium, broaden the cover, increase the availability of cover. And just as an aside, because I've got a couple of minutes, we've started seeing clients with exclusions in their D&O policy for tailings. D&O, directors and officers, is the insurance you need to protect company directors against the liabilities. If you can't cover them for the biggest liability most mining companies have, you're not going to really hire any directors. So I mean, this is existential for some companies. So that's a very quick canter. through what it is, what it does, how it works. Want to have a chat afterwards, come to see me, I can show you the dashboard. But what I want you to take away is it's an integrated solution. ICMM tell us we're the only people who've got the risk management piece, the monitoring piece, which is state-of-the-art technology, cutting edge, and the insurance piece. You don't need it all. You might want it all. You might want elements of it, or you might want it all in a different sequence. It's what the mine requires, and what the portfolio of mines, of failings facilities across a bigger company require. So we configure it as you would like it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ian. And I'm sure most people in the audience will appreciate the importance of that presentation on the managing the risks around tailings for operations, but also the commercial risk as well. So our next presenter is well known, Richard Elmer, Director with the UK Office of Knight Piésold, and his presentation today is on tailings efficiency, minimisation and monitoring. So thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much for the introduction, and thank you thank you Arthur for organising this great conference as always. So my presentation today is actually going to touch on quite a few of the themes that have been covered by my co-presenters today, but we'll give a quick run through how to manage tailings efficiently and with ongoing monitoring. Brief company overview. Probably many of you in the room know of Knight Piésold. We've been going just over 100 years now. We celebrated a 100-year anniversary last year, so we know quite a lot about mining and tailings. We're around 1,000 staff worldwide. I head up the London office. We really focus on tailings and mine geotechnics, and as well as open pit and underground rock mechanics. I thought I'd just give a bit of a flavour of what we've been doing in the region. We've undertaken a lot of work for ArcelorMittal, for example. We audit all of their tailings facilities worldwide, including their facility in Bosnia. We designed a dry stack tailings facility for MINECO, also in Bosnia, and have recently completed an initial assessment for Eastern mining at Vjavača. Also worked across the region with people like Eldorado, and also in Serbia. Lots of work currently in North Macedonia on the Saturn mine. That's one of our largest current projects. We're very, very proud of what we're doing in Sasa, designing a dry stack facility that is being constructed on top of an old tailings facility. I'll come back to that one in a minute in a bit more detail. I've just come back from Chelopech last night. We were there. We're looking at taking on the engineer record responsibility at Chelopech. And yeah, working other projects in Turkey and around the region. So conventional tailings operations, as James was indicating earlier, have focused on high water content slurry operations. I won't dwell on that, but one of the significant things is that it is conventional tailings facilities that have had the highest rate of failures, and of those that have been raised using the upstream method have been the most risky type of facilities. As you can see on that bottom table, the majority of failures are in upstream facilities. So that's where it's critical to monitor those closely. A little bit about, again, covering what both the Jameses actually have covered earlier. In terms of minimisation, remining of existing tailings is clearly a benefit. Not only do you gain the economic value from the entrained minerals that are still available that can be obtained with modern processing techniques, you can also restore the land and have a new facility to international standards. So it's a win-win-win for if the facility is suitable for remining. Other ways of reducing tailings: better ore selection, either in the mining process through grade control, so you're mining more ore, mining less waste. Obviously ore sorting as well, reducing the amount that goes through the processing plant. Reuse of tailings is particularly focused on recently, looking at particularly the coarse fraction being used in aggregate industry. There are challenges with all of these types of reuses in that you have to be near a market, but it is all part of the circular economy and how we should be looking at the whole life of a mine and the tailings. But after having said all that, there is still a portion of tailings that will need to be stored on the surface, and we need to do that safely. And probably the best way of doing that is dewatering the tailings and storing the surface, storing on the surface in a safe manner. If you're looking at underground storage for a new facility, you can only probably put back around at the maximum 50% of the material that you take out of the ground. If you have a mine, as Andrew was talking about, that's got lots of existing underground space, then you can put a greater proportion back underground. But if you are still likely to have surface disposal requirements, and the use of filter tailings, or dry stack as it's commonly known, minimises the footprints, improves stability, and saves water, and can reduce the groundwater impact. So that's just the example of the circular economy, of how to go through the whole life cycle of mining and tailings production. So, as commented on by the preceding speakers, the global industry standard on tailings management has been a game changer for the mining industry and in terms of tailings management. But there have also been other improvements through time. Improvements of 3D modelling software has enabled optimising the feasibility and design of facilities. And as I've been saying, the tailings dewatering piece is extremely important. Again, this has been touched on already. Conventional tailings are a slurry. They're with a very high water content, minimum solids content. Some of the facilities we're looking at have as low as like 5% solids at deposition. There are various degrees of thickening that you can do through to remove different levels of water from the tailings, culminating in filter cake, where the moisture content can be down at around 10 to 20%, usually around 15% water content. And that is effectively you're producing a building material then that produces, when you place it, can produce a stable deposit. So I thought I'd just run through a few examples of where we've optimised the surface disposal of mine tailings. I think they're all European examples. The first one was a lead mine in Bosnia. And the key thing about this was that the dry stack solution was chosen because the location of the tailings is on karstic ground conditions. And we needed to minimise the footprint due to boundary constraints, and it also allowed progressive restoration. And it was key to getting the regulatory approvals by having this solution. Another one is the Sasa mine in North Macedonia that we're going through the design process at the moment. This was particularly innovative in that the mine was running out of space where they could place the tailings. It was backfilling a valley, and it was encroaching towards downstream communities. So we have come up with a design that will place the filter tailings on top of an old tailings facility at the top end of the valley. So the process, it's in collaboration with our colleagues at SRK, who are working on the geochemical analysis of the facility. We've come up with a staged solution that allows the storage of tailings in a location that would otherwise be a brownfield site. Another project that again uses similar technology for the removal of water from the tailings before deposition is a small-scale gold mine in Scotland. There was an original concept of doing a traditional cross-valley slurry tailings facility that would have incurred an expensive diversion channel for the river. We've replaced that with producing a series of small dry stacks, and the dry stacks will replicate the morphology of the original glacial terrain in that valley. So we're producing a series of stacks that are restored when you've completed each stack, and that allowed us to get a permit in a national park in Scotland, which was the only way that we'd have been able to have gained that permit is through this very sensitive construction and restoration of the tailings facility. Oh, there's filtered tailings coming off the end of the conveyor. As you can see, it's a very dry material, and you can use that as a construction material to build each of the tailings stacks. It does need to be treated as if it is a civil engineering construction, so you have to spread it, roll or compact it, so it builds a stable stack. And you can see on there just an outline of where the stacks will be located, but they will be the topsoil and peat is stripped. The stack is built, and then the topsoil is placed back on top of the stack to restore it to the original appearance of the ground. So the other key part of successful tailings management is monitoring of existing facilities. This is just an example of a conventional slurry facility. So it is best practice, and again, building on what Ian's been saying, to comply with GISTM and regulators, you need an effective dam safety management program. The operations manual must be in place. You have to have the key staff that are in place. Most important of which is having an accountable executive who is actually having budgetary control to be able to fund what's necessary to do the right thing with the tailings in terms of construction and monitoring. So, and the key thing about monitoring is that you have to have trigger levels that are set by engineers that understand the process of tailings management. And real-time monitoring is a key part of that. So back in in around 2018, I think it was, we started developing, along with Inmarsat, a system for real-time tailings monitoring that incorporates many of the feeds from different instrumentation. So it's just a schematic. You have the on-site logging, the analysis, and review of information, and it comes in real time, and able to send alarm notifications to if there are any out of normal condition situations. So, yeah, I think that's just a schematic of how the system works by collecting collecting instrumentation data, whether it's piezometers, inclinometers, and so on, and bringing it to a cloud, and then distribution to whichever user needs it. So, one thing, just as a bit of a word of warning about monitoring, is that the monitoring it's improved significantly over the past few years, and it will make tailings facilities safer. But monitoring alone isn't the answer. It doesn't replace expertise in tailings dam design and management. Critical, as I say, is the setting of the trigger the trigger levels and the action responses to those to triggering those. And there's a little graphic on the bottom of how that, for one of our projects, we're monitoring the piezometers and looking at the different trigger levels. It needs an engineer to, as Ian was saying, to locate the monitoring points and the type of instrumentation that's required. And it's not just forgotten. You can't just go away, oh right, we've got a monitoring system. It needs active management and regular reviews by the tailings specialists, which can't replace on the ground experience. So just in closure, improved tailings processing technology has led to the development of more efficient, sustainable and safer storage facilities through reducing water volumes on the TSF. It's all about the water. That is key to tailings dam safety. Reduce the water on the facility, you'll make it safer. Filter tailings provides a lower risk alternative to conventional slurry tailings. There needs to be study into the choice of which whether it's suitable for all projects. We found that it works very well at the smaller end of the market, where there are particular challenges in terms of tailings deposition. On top of that, reliable round-the-clock monitoring systems improve data gathering, and it's no longer limited by manual data logging, and is used in geotechnical assessments, increasing operational confidence. And as I say, data monitoring systems must be used in conjunction with experience and expertise. So, thank you very much.
Thank you, Richard, and thanks for all the presenters for the valuable technical content to make it an interesting session today. Is Arthur there?
I'm here. You've got 1 minute for questions.
Well, okay. So maybe I'll just start with the question, maybe directed, to yourself, Richard, there, given that you just finished. I have a question around dry stack facilities, which seem to that's what we're all being pushed to use these days, and that's what we want to achieve. But in Knight Peasold's experience, what are some of the major sort of challenges that have popped up on projects with achieving dry stack facilities? More probably everything can be solved at a cost, but what are the key physical challenges?
Okay, so we're now well into having designed and built and monitoring the construction of fair few facilities now. And yes, there are lessons that that have been learned along the way. I think probably the key one is to have a backup if there's a problem with the tailings dewatering equipment. If the filter presses go down, there needs to be an alternative route for the tailings if there's an interruption in the standard process. I think that's one of the key ones. Climate as well is a very important consideration because, as I mentioned, we're talking about an engineered structure that requires the tailings to be placed in layers and compacted. That is much harder to do when it's raining, essentially. It's not impossible, but it needs careful consideration. So temporary stockpiling, the areas for temporary stockpiles are important part of the design, so that if there's a period of heavy rain, then you wait till the rain stops and then start again. It might need a little bit of, you might need to scrape off the top layer, but then start placing again. The third, there are only three. The third thing is an acknowledgement, or the operator needs to understand that OPEX can be significant because they need to employ on the tailings facility full time. There will need to be plant operating, so you'll need distribution by trucks or conveyor, a front end loader to move the tailings around, excavators, a roller to compact the tailings, and there's then the testing of the tailings to make sure they meet the in situ density meets the design requirements. So there's quite a lot of operational considerations that need to be thought about and acknowledged and costed for. It's not like turning on a valve on a conventional facility. It's a continuous process through the life of the facility to build it. So I think they're probably the. I'm just sorry, just looking at my colleague Lucy, who's the design engineer for most of them. I'm trying to think what I've forgotten on the list of. Yes. So yeah, I think they're the key challenges.
Okay, so enough sort of temporary storage capacity and extra equipment just to move things around when things are in maintenance or not working properly.
Yeah, exactly that. Yeah.
And just if I can squeeze in a question there to yourself there, Andrew. You know, our experience is we're getting pushed more and more, and we want to send more sort of tailings back underground to you know, minimise surface impact and you know, just make it easier getting through the permitting process. And I'm just wondering if you're having the same experiences. You know, every project you're looking for every opportunity there to send as much tailings back underground and you know, use that to your advantage in your underground mine planning.
Yeah, absolutely, Chris. It's a good question. You know, many projects we work on, the mining method, you know, because of depth or rock condition demands backfill. So there's an automatic opportunity to dispose of more tailings underground, you know, when the mining method requires backfill. So that's kind of option number one. In many instances and current projects that we're doing, we're responding to requirements to place backfill underground, even though the mining method doesn't require it, just because it gives a benefit for tailings disposal. Well, in terms of reduction in tailings disposal requirements on surface, even when there's real estate, it's still an advantage to have less tailings on surface. And as I said, certainly with Tellerhäuser in particular, but we've got one other project where there are available voids, and we take that additional opportunity to dispose of tailings into those additional voids, and maybe even then get a complete remediation of the tailings. So yeah, there's a drive for that for sure, where You know, before you would have only used tailings for backfill when backfill was, you know, required. We put the extra design effort in and the extra OPEX just to make sure then the tailings doesn't manifest on surface. But there's always some residual tailings that has to be managed.
Yeah, similar experience to ourselves there. You know, clients are more willing to consider, you know, some additional operating costs to put it back underground just to minimise that surface footprint. So, yeah, that seems to be a sort of motivation target these days. Okay, thank you everyone, and particularly the presenters today for all being on time. So I don't think that's ever happened, so I won't get scolded by Arthur there. And thanks again, Arthur, for making the effort to, you know, make a success of the conference this year in person. And I believe that's a coffee break for everyone.
Thanks very much.